This is our May 19th Bowling Green, Warren County Planning Commission meeting, and call the meeting to order. Who's going to call the roll? Ben?
Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Sissel?
Here.
Commissioner Clark? Commissioner Drain?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Gay? Commissioner Graham?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Starks? Commissioner Unsler?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Volker? Yes, sir. Chair Warren?
Yes, sir. You have, Commissioners, we have the minutes of our May the 5th, 2020 meeting in your packets. Are there any questions regarding the minutes of our last meeting? I would call for a motion, please.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Volker?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Sissel?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark? Oh, sorry, not here. Commissioner Drain?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unsel?
Yes, sir.
Chair Warren?
Yes, sir. We now enter into our public hearing. Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I request that you order that the record tonight include all relevant statutory and regulatory provisions, the Commission's entire file for each application on tonight's docket, and the qualifications of each staff witness. Kindly please administer the oath to each of those witnesses.
Do you all swear to tell the truth?
Sir.
Thank you very much. In our packets, Commissioners, we have our subdivision site development plans in your packets. Are there any questions? They will be approved as mailed. Ben, is there any new business tonight?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I mean, excuse me, I
Yep.
was looking at old business.
Yeah, don't want to forget this. So we
All
need
right,
the help.
excuse me.
We can take all the help we can get right now. So you do have the memo personnel for some personnel actions to make 2 hires. The memo, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Be happy to answer any questions about any candidates, but we are recommending both McKenna Tabor as our administrative coordinator and Jenny Willoughby for our Planner 1 position tonight.
Commissioners, are there any questions about the 2 prospective hires? And Mr. Peterson is very excited along with the staff, and thank you all for taking time to interview those folks. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that the commission approve the hiring of McKenna Tabor for the position of administrative coordinator and Jenna Willoughby for the position of planner as recommended.
Second.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unseld?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Volker? Yes, sir. Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Sissel?
Yes.
Chair Warren?
Sir, the motion is approved. Thank you all. We have no old business being
Graham? Thank you. Sorry. I knew I forgot somebody. No old business.
old business. We enter into our public hearing. Our first item tonight is 2022-10 Flume. The Inter-Modal Transportation Authority, care of Ron Bunch, has filed an application for a future land use map amendment on a tract of land containing approximately 1.6 acres located at 1171 Freeport Road from agriculture to industrial. If this Flume amendment is approved, the Inter-Modal Transportation Authority, care of Ron Bunch, has filed an application to rezone a tract of land containing approximately 1.6 acres located at 1171 Freeport Road from ag to HI, heavy industrial, with a general development plan. Ms. Hurd, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Warren. We had a pre-application meeting back in August for this property, and it should look somewhat familiar. If we zoom out to the zoning map, you'll see the property adjacent to this to the south is also zoned heavy industrial, and this was rezoned fairly recently, I believe at the end of last year. So the proposal this evening would add this 1 acre piece of property in with what was previously zoned back late last year. The current land use is single-family residential And the future land use map designation is agriculture with a proposed amendment to industrial. The second page of your staff report includes a reference to LU 1.1.4 from the comprehensive plan, which outlines the criteria to amend the future land use map. The applicants supplied the narrative at the bottom of page 2 to address this criteria. That is there for your reference. Then looking at the layout of the proposal, again, it's the intent that this 1 acre piece of property would be added in with what was already approved at the end of last year for the acreage to the south. With that, I'm going to touch on the development plan conditions on page 4, and you'll see somewhat of a unique condition, but essentially this says that the proposed rezoning, if approved, that the development plan conditions that are already in place for all of the acreage to the south, again, this heavy industrial zoned area, would then be applied to this 1 acre piece of property, and they would function together. So those conditions are listed, the ones that were already previously approved. Below that, those are there for your reference. If you have any questions about any of those, I'll be happy to go through those as needed. Looking at the Focus 2030 category review, we evaluated several items from the comprehensive plan. There are a few that I will note that are there for your consideration. The first, looking at LU 1.1.1 and 1.1.2, which look at the future land use map. LU 1.1.3 deals with compatibility. LU 2 looks at quality of development. Jumping on the back page, just a couple more items. NCR 2.4 and 2.4.1, which address development of the countryside and Warren County's rural and agricultural heritage. Jump back and wrap up on page 1, and really, again, we just had one point to consider, and that is if this proposal is approved, the property will be consolidated with the Transpark and assume the same development plan conditions as the adjacent 232 acres to the south. And with that, I think that's all for the staff report, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Rachel. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Hurt?
Right, yep. It's that tiny red area, I guess it's outlined here. Everything else that surrounds it to the east and to the south is zoned heavy industrial.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Hurd? All right. Thank you, Rachel. Is the applicant here and anything they would like to add, please?
Good evening. Gaines Penn, attorney for the ITA. Address is 1101 College Street, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Mr. Penn, you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I know you have a full agenda, so I will be brief. This is basically a housekeeping measure where the ITA purchased the big tract. We closed on that in 2021, and this body rezoned it. In February, we picked up that one remaining acre, which has a little house on it, and that is going to be part of the bigger piece of land that will be the first phase of the new battery plant. So we're excited about this.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Penn?
Mr. Penn, just a point of clarity, all of the zoning and the general development plan conditions will be the same as all of the surrounding areas, is that correct? I think you
That's
made that
exactly
pretty clear, but
correct.
just making sure I understand.
I think the phrase is adopt by reference.
There
We're
you
going
go.
or incorporate by reference what's already on the 232 acres.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You pull your microphone down so everybody could hear you. Thank you. Cecil.
That the staff suggested that the new buildings be oriented to the new roads, so what's happened with that suggestion?
Well, I think that's fine. I mean, if you notice on the drawing, I'm not savvy enough to get a better drawing, so I'll just work off of that one, but that Production Avenue is going to be extended up, and the buildings will be acclimated towards that. This little lot fronts on Freeport Road, and I believe, in all candor, I don't think any of the plant's going to be anywhere near that, at least the first phase anyway. So that'll just be open space.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. Any other questions, commissioners? Thank you, Gaines.
Thank you.
So our first motion tonight is to amend, oh, excuse me. Is there any opposition to this request tonight? Hearing none, our first amendment would be the flume, and all commissioners will vote, the flume amendment will vote on that. Thank you.
Make a motion to approve the proposed future land use map amendment, docket number 2022-10 Flume, based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed Flume amendment has met the criteria to amend the Flume as outlined in LU 1.1.4 in the comprehensive plan. Further, I request this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ritchie? Yes, sir. Commissioner Unsold?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Volker?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Blackburn? Yes, sir. Commissioner Sissel?
Yes.
Commissioner Drain?
Yes, sir.
Chair Warren?
Sir, the motion passed. Our next motion would be to approve the zoning map amendment. And it will be the Commissioner Drain, Starks, Volker, Unseld, Vitale, and Warren.
I make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2022-21ZBG. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan, as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony by the witnesses presented at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unsold?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Volker?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Drain? Chair Warren?
Yes, sir. The motion passed and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission. Our next item for tonight is 2022-11 Flume, Oralea Dalia Esparza Evans has filed an application for a future land use map amendment on a portion of a tract of land containing approximately 1 acre located at 3399 Will Bohannon Road from agricultural to rural density residential. If this future land use map amendment is approved, the same applicants have filed an application to rezone a portion of a tract of land containing approximately 1 acre located at 3399 Will Bohannon Road from agriculture to RE residential state with a general development plan. Amy?
Mr. Chair, we had a pre-application meeting for the property highlighted in yellow and that you mentioned on April 11th. Current zoning is agriculture. The proposed zoning is RE. The proposed land use is single-family residential, and the future land use is agriculture. The applicant is proposing to amend the flume for 1 acre located on a portion of 3399 Will Bohannon Road from agriculture to rural density residential. And if the flume amendment is approved, the applicant would like to rezone the same portion of the property from agriculture to RE in order to subdivide the home on a smaller lot. The existing home is proposed to remain. So if you flip over to page 2, there is the future land use map category that outlines the procedures for amending the flume, and the applicant has supplied a narrative there to address that criteria. If you flip over to page 3, there is the development plan conditions. So the applicant submitted the following development plan conditions. Number 1, if the existing residence is ever replaced, any new residence constructed on the property shall be oriented to face Will Bohannon Road. Number 2, if the existing residence is ever replaced, any new primary residential structure constructed on the property shall contain a minimum of 1,200 square feet of heated space. Number 3, the existing entrance is proposed to remain and will continue to serve the property. In the event of any changes are proposed regarding access to the property, such modification shall be made in coordination and approved by the Warren County Public Works Department. Number 4, the existing residents will continue to utilize a septic system located on the property, and the Barren River Health Department shall perform a site evaluation if any new residence is built prior to the issuance of a building permit. Number 5, existing vegetation shall be preserved to the greatest extent feasible. Number 6, if the existing residence is ever replaced, at least 25% of the exterior of any new residential structure shall be constructed of cementitious material. The foundation for any new residential structure will be brick veneer and excludes plain and split-faced block. And number 7, sinkholes shall be avoided or properly mitigated during future development of the site. Moving down to the Focus 2030 category review, I'll highlight the first 2 paragraphs there, that the proposal may comply with LU 1.1.1, LU 1.1.2, and LU 2, but the Planning Commission needs to determine if those comply. Moving back over to the first page, points to consider. The applicants could subdivide the existing home on a 5-acre tract without applying for a flume amendment or rezoning the property. And the Planning Commission should determine if the subdivision of a 1-acre lot tract in this location is compatible with the primary agriculture character along Will Bohannon Road. That is all we have for the staff report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions for Amy?
So as I look at the plat, it appears the same owner owns the larger tract as well. Is that correct? And what's the purpose?
I believe she's giving it to a son.
Okay. And
she
that's the
wants to
reason they're
keep
cutting
this
it off?
property, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you, Amy. Is the applicant here tonight? Yes, ma'am, if you would come up to the microphone, please. Would you state your name and address, please?
Oralea Dalia Esparza, and my address is 2778 Will Bohannon Road.
Swear to tell the truth before this commission? Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
And so, ma'am, you heard the staff report earlier. You're just cutting this off to give it to a relative, or is that right? All right, very good. That's the only question I have. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Is there any opposition to this request here tonight? Hearing no opposition, would call for a motion, please, for the flume amendment.
I make the motion to approve the proposed future land use map amendment, docket number 2022-11 flume. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed flume amendment has met the directive to amend the flume as outlined in LU 1.1.4 in the comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ritchie. Yes, sir. Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale,
Sir.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Blackburn. Yes, sir. Commissioner Sissel,
Yes.
Chair Warren.
So the motion is approved for the flume amendment. Now would call for a motion, please, on the zoning map amendment.
I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and conditioned upon the general development plan, docket number 2022-29Z-CO. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 Comprehensive Plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in this staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include the summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Drain,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale, Commissioner Volkert, Chair Warren.
Yes, the motion is approved for the Flume Amendment and the rezoning, and will go to Warren County Fiscal Court. Our next item tonight is item number 2022-01, RWC, Fairview Memorial Missionary Baptist Church has filed an application to close approximately 1/3 of an acre of unimproved right-of-way fronting Fairview Avenue, located between 1132 and 1150 Fairview Avenue. Amy?
Thank you. Okay, as you mentioned, this is an application to close approximately 0.32 acres of right-of-way fronting Fairview Avenue. We have provided the zoning ordinance requirements there on the first page. The applicant has submitted letters to various agencies that are provided below. There, underneath that, there were no conditions imposed by any of the agencies. Over to page 2, there is the findings of fact that are necessary for closure of a right-of-way for your review. And under the staff review summary, staff recommends the following condition of approval. A plat consolidating the closed right-of-way with the adjacent properties must be recorded at the Warren County Courthouse within 120 days of final approval of the right-of-way closure by the Bowling Green City Commission. And flipping back over to the first page, points to consider, there are none.
Commissioners, any questions for Amy? Thank you very much. Is the applicant here and they would have anything they would like to add? State your name and address, please, sir.
Hi, Greg Meredith. My address is 2962 Cross Ridge Court here in Bowling Green.
Can you tell the truth?
I can.
Okay.
Thank you. So the purpose of this closure, obviously, if you look at the map and the drawing, this was laid out years ago, probably when the first time these tracts were actually parceled out, and you can see even where the apartments are, you know, the old lot lines. So with this, the division of the property when it's closed was agreed to give a portion, a triangular portion, to the apartment complex. It's called the Enclave now. The remainder portion is only an access to the church, of which I'm a member. And so, therefore, the majority of the property will go to the church as their primary entrance, rather than it being on an unimproved right-of-way with the city.
Thank you, Mr. Meredith. Commissioners, any questions for Greg? Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in opposition to this request tonight? Hearing none, would call for a motion for this amendment, please.
Make the motion to approve the right-of-way closing docket number 2022-01 RWC with condition as listed in the staff report. My motion is based on findings of fact that is presented in the staff report and the testimony presented in this public hearing that the right-of-way closing is in compliance with section 3.16 of the Warren County zoning ordinance.
Second.
Mr. Volkert,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Drain, Commissioner Graham,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale, Chair Warren.
Sir, the motion approved and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission. Ben, are we in agreement to do all 7 of them? Okay. Thank you all that are here tonight. Just let me read this off. These are going to apply to all of the areas affected by the tornado. 2022-330 ZBG, City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone tracts of land in a portion of the Briarwood, Fairview area from RM2, two-family residential, to RS1A, single-family residential. 2022-31 ZBG, the City County Planning Commission and the Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone tracts of land in a portion of the Briarwood, Wood Hollow area from RM3 townhouse multifamily residential to RS1A single-family residential. 2022-32 ZBG, the City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone tracts of land in a portion of the Briarwood Manor area from RM3 townhouse multifamily residential to RS1A single-family residential. 2022-33 ZBG, the City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone tracts of land in a portion of the Briarwood Lovers Lane area from RM3 townhouse multifamily residential and RM4 multifamily residential to RS1D single-family residential. 2022-34 ZBG, the City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone a small triangular-shaped portion of 1000 Woodhurst Street, Bowling Green, Warren County Airport in the Briarwood area from RM3 townhouse multifamily residential to P Public. 2022-35 ZBG, the City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone tracts of land in a portion of the Covington Wakefield area from RM2 two-family residential to RS1A single-family residential. And the last one is 2022-36 ZBG. The City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone a tract of land in a portion of the Whispering Hills area from RM3 townhouse multifamily residential and highway business to RS1C single-family residential. Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Warren. That may be the last time you read an entire page of agenda at once. Just for the audience and for everyone listening, so this is all the neighborhoods that we have talked with all of you about, except Nutwood Magnolia. We're taking that one separate because there's a little bit of a difference there, that a couple of additions, including a text amendment that we'll discuss separately. So for all of the sections that were just read, and I'll go through the map real quick, this request is a little different. It is initiated by Planning Commission and the City of Bowling Green. Most of the time you have an applicant stand up here and explain to you their application and ask for your approval. Due to the disaster, the tragedy of the December 11th tornadoes, we identified several neighborhoods where the zoning didn't quite match the character of the homes and the neighborhoods there. In order to address that, we initiated this process. We went to each neighborhood. We had a series of neighborhood meetings, explained what we would like to do, which is this process tonight, and believe we have overwhelming support for that. We'll find out when we ask here in a minute. But so the first section I will go through. So in general, every one of these neighborhoods that you just were introduced to were some designation of multifamily, and we're being asked to downzone those to a single-family designation. And so we'll go through the specifics of that now. The first one on the list is what we just called the Briarwood Fairview section. You see that up on the map in front of you. So all of those maps that are outlined in yellow, those parcels that are outlined in yellow and are orange in color, we're asking to change that from RM2 multifamily to go to RS1A, which is our most restrictive single-family zone. As you can see, all of the surrounding homes and areas are RS1A, so it will match those, with the exception of Camden Court there. Those are RS1D, but those have smaller lots. So this will be taking that the character of those existing homes, matching the rest of the neighborhood. Is there any questions about this particular section?
Just a couple, just to make sure I understand. Are there any existing multifamily structures on any of these lots currently?
Not that I'm aware of in this neighborhood.
Okay. RS1A, does that require sidewalks?
Not in already built. So that's the other difference, I guess, in the nature of these requests tonight. Most of the time, we're asking for approval to build a new subdivision. Here, we're asking to change the zoning of existing already built environment. So in all of these requests, the only thing that is requested to be changed is the zoning designation itself.
So they don't have to go back and do anything to comply if for some reason it's deficient, say sidewalk is missing, they don't have to go back and put a sidewalk in?
There's no parameters like that involved here.
Okay.
This is simply zoning that, changing that zoning designation to better reflect the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, the next section, and this is all part of what I guess collectively is thought of, at least by me maybe, as Briarwood. So this was a little section on Wood Hollow Way. That again, they're outlined in yellow, a portion of that red, where we would be asking to change from RM3 with binding elements to RS1A with binding elements. No change at all in the binding elements. The binding elements that are currently established will remain. I guess a side note I'll mention is I believe most of those binding elements, now that we call them development plan conditions, but those did expire several years ago. But we do not feel that it is our place to offer binding elements as an applicant here. Generally, that's voluntary by the applicant. Since we're not a developer in this case, we'll just keep all of that the same. So again, it'll just be changing the zoning designation from that RM3 multifamily to that RS1A single family. Again, to match the zoning around it. One thing else I'll mention is the zoning designations were picked based on what the rest of the surrounding neighborhood is, but also the closest matched in the current zoning ordinance of lot sizes, setbacks, and the development standards. So that's RS1A was picked for this section.
So do I understand there will be essentially no binding elements in place for these lots?
The same binding elements that exist today will be the same binding elements that'll exist if the city commission approves it.
All right.
So no change at all.
Thank you.
So this is a bigger section of that same area. This is what we were just looking at here, the little section of Wood Hollow. This is kind of that greater portion. You can see it's a significant part of this neighborhood that is currently zoned RM3 multifamily. This section would also be is requested to be converted to RS1A single family. Exact same situation, same binding elements. So the next section is a little bit different character, but still all single family in character. I guess the Lover's Lane section, just because it was closer to Lover's Lane. These are requested to go from RM3 and RM4 multifamily to RS1D. And single family. And the RS1D is due to the smaller lot sizes. All these homes are essentially what we call twin homes today, where it's one structure with a parting wall between it, and then a lot line between it. So everything's on its own lot, so that it still fits in that within that single family character. So again, nothing really changes with regard to the character of the neighborhood. We're just changing that zoning designation from multifamily to single family. And then this one was just an interesting little tail left over. The airport owns the property. It was just an extension off the end of the neighborhood. So while we were going through this process, we thought we would just go ahead and clean that up. So it'll change from RM3 with binding elements to P public to match the rest of the airport property. And I did speak with airport manager Susan Harmon about this, so before I brought it to you. So the next section is Covington Wakefield. We have these two blocks essentially here that were zoned RM2, are zoned RM2, two-family, multifamily residential, and we are requesting that those go to RS1A, single-family residential, which matches all of the other properties surrounding it. And then the last one that we've called in this section is Whispering Hills neighborhood. This is a portion of Whispering Hills. Again, outlined in yellow as the parcels that are proposed to be changed. We are requesting that they go from highway business and RM3 multifamily to RS1C. The little piece of highway business is just at the back of this lot here, these two little slivers. Everything else that's commercial facing Russellville Road and all of the existing apartment buildings will remain the same zoning designation of RM3 or highway business. Again, it's just the properties outlined in yellow that we will be asking to convert or downzone to RS1C. And again, that's a single-family zoning designation. It best matched the lot sizes and setbacks for this Whispering Hills neighborhood. Let me make sure. Okay. So that's a general rundown of what the request is for that page of the agenda. I'll be happy to answer any questions about any of those neighborhoods that we just went through, or go over anything in any of the staff reports. But we may, I'll also mention that we've had numerous letters of support that were at your seats. We did get another letter of support that was handed to us at the beginning of the meeting. So all of that is part of the public record. So I just want to make mention of that too.
All right, Commissioners, first thing, we'd like to thank our staff for all the time that you took to meet with the public and help everybody out to understand this. So just want to say thank you for the many extra hours. So, Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Peterson regarding these first 7 zoning map amendments?
Can we just read one motion with all the numbers in it?
We will in just a second.
Okay.
Thank you, Christian. But any questions for Mr. Peterson? Thank you, Ben. Just a minute, ma'am. Just a minute. You'll get your turn, okay? Oh, yeah, okay. We appreciate everybody being here tonight, and you're welcome to come and ask any questions. And this is our public hearing, so if anybody has a question of the staff or the presentations, please come to the microphone and we will swear you in. It's not that scary. That's okay. Yes, ma'am, if you would state your name and your address, please.
Sarah Crane, currently 851 Nutwood.
Okay. Ms. Green, do you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Okay,
I do.
thank you.
When he was describing the two, it sounds like a duplex, where it's down the middle. So, is that correct? So you've got a house, and right down the middle, they're butted together. But that's more or less a duplex, is it not?
So the difference is that there's a property line down the middle of that. So you could own one half, I could own the other half.
Totally.
So from the road, the appearance could look like a duplex, but you could own each half. And again,
Right.
this is the existing character of the neighborhood, so that is
Exactly.
not proposed to change at all.
I just wanted to
Mhm.
ask that question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
We call
Thank
that
you.
an attached single family. Attached single family versus a duplex would be multifamily on one lot.
Anyone else in the audience like to make a comment or questions or opposition to this request? Yes, sir. If you'd come to the microphone, please. Yes. Your name and address, please, sir?
76 Pepperidge Drive.
Your name?
Don Austin.
Okay, Mr. Lawson, you
I do.
swear to tell the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you.
Are these bonding agreements that you're coming to, or can these be changed subsequently?
So zoning is, so tonight what happens is this, the public hearing, this is where we create the public record. This body will take a vote. If, assuming they vote approval, that will go as in the form of a positive recommendation to the Bowling Green City Commission. The Bowling Green City Commission will then actually have to consider that at 2 readings, because it's law, it's in the form of an ordinance. So they would actually be changing the law to change the zoning as we've described tonight, assuming they approve it. Any subsequent request would then have to go through this same process as an individual application, like maybe you see some of our signs and see so will it ever change from here? I will never say never, but they will have to go through the public hearing process, have a sign, to go through the notification process and all of that.
Probably not.
So probably not.
Probably forever.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Your name and address, please?
Boy Baker, 128 Whispering Hills Boulevard.
Ms. Baker, you swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you all for this opportunity and what you're doing and the time spending doing it, and that I am here to support it. I know there's a lot of people here. If we could just show a raise of hands if you're here supporting this cause, just so everyone sees how many have come out, and I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Baker.
Thank you.
That was my next question. Let me ask a question. Is there anyone here with a show of hands in opposition to these requests tonight? All right, thank you very much.
You repeat that, I hardly ever see that. In fact, I don't know that I've ever seen this many people come together and ask for something positive for your neighborhood. So I applaud each of you for getting involved in the process. Many times, as commissioners, we're in the unfortunate position of sitting here telling someone they're probably not going to succeed in denying whatever is happening. But tonight, it makes it a very pleasurable experience to see a group of people come out and want to protect their neighborhood. So I applaud each of you for getting involved in that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. We hear no opposition. We've heard from the folks in our audience. Would call for a motion, please. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We will call for a motion, Christian, is one motion to approve all 7 of them.
Do you have a list of them, Christian? Do you want to just read it off and then just read the motion? Okay, very good.
You want all the numbers read?
Yes, if you would just, if you would
Okay, so
just read
I make the
the
motion.
7 numbers.
I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment docket number 2022-30 ZBG, docket number 2022-31 ZBG, 2022-32 ZBG, 2022-33 ZBG, 2022-34 ZBG, 2022-35 ZBG, 2022-36 ZBG.
Thank you, Mr. Volker. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Volker,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Drain,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale. Chair Warren.
Yes, sir. The motion passed and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission for approval, as Mr. Peterson said, 2 readings. Thank you all for being here tonight. Our last 2 items tonight are 2022-37ZBG. The City County Planning Commission and Bowling Green City Commission have initiated an application to rezone tracts of land in a portion of the Nutwood Magnolia area from RS1D single-family residential and RM2 two-family residential to RS1D single-family residential.
Why don't you go ahead and call number 14 too, please?
Number 14. The City County Planning Commission will hold a public hearing to consider a text amendment to the zoning ordinance of Warren County in order to revise Articles 2, 3, 4, and Appendix A, including an addition of Exhibit H.
Thank you. So the difference in this neighborhood is that we have a text amendment and a couple of other things, and an overlay zone that we're also asking to establish. And here in just a second, I'm going to ask Rachel to help me out here on the text amendment and go over those changes. So like the other neighborhoods, the main request here tonight is to change the parcels that aren't currently single-family to single-family. So we have a mixture of zoning here, and the parcels that are outlined again in yellow, colors are green and orange of those parcels. So basically, it'll be RM2 and RS1D to RS1D single family. So the RM2 is the multifamily zoning designation. We just had a mix of single family RS1D, so we're looking to change all of those parcels to the single family RS1D zoning designation. So that's the first part. There's 2 other parts that we'll discuss tonight. The second is for this same area, for those same parcels outlined, will be to establish an overlay zone. We're calling this an architectural overlay zone. And what it does is instill some controls over kind of the form and character of any new homes that would be built in the neighborhood. I will just summarize it, and then Rachel will go through it when she goes through the text amendment. But essentially, you would stand on the street, you would look at the missing home, if you will, you would look to the left and to the right, and you would want to incorporate elements that would match that to do that. The way we have it written would be a staff approval for 99% of the applications to eliminate some of the burden that we may have time for that we have in some of our historic zones. So this would be largely a staff approval, but it's written as things that can generally, we feel, be approved by staff, certain roof pitches, window sizes, those things. So that's the second element of it. The third element of it would be to introduce the ability to have a true accessory apartment. And rather than me fumble through that, I'll let Rachel explain that whenever she gets to the zoning amendment. So for now, I'll just say the item 13 is to change the zoning of that entire outline area to the RS1D single family. And then with that, also establish the overlay zone. Now, the overlay zone then requires the text change as well. So if you're ready, I'm ready to hand it off.
Okay, so like Ben said, there's a few moving parts. this evening concerning this neighborhood. And the first, again, is to just establish the single-family zoning for the neighborhood. So that's kind of part one. Then along with that would be a text amendment. There are changes that are summarized. Hopefully you've got those in your packet. It should be a page that looks similar to this. The overlay itself that Ben mentioned would be established in Articles 2, 3, and in Appendix A. So those changes would relate directly to that overlay zone. The changes proposed in Article 3 and 4 relate to the new development standards for the overlay zone and new standards for accessory apartments that Ben had just mentioned a second ago. So with that, I'm going to touch on a few items, mainly the development standards that are proposed for the overlay.
Which page are you on, Rachel?
Those are on page 4-91. So you will see on page 4-91 the proposal to establish the Nutwood Magnolia Overlay District. And then about midway down, there are certain development standards that are listed relating to the front yard setback. So like Ben said earlier, the goal is that if you are doing some sort of infill development in this neighborhood, you would look and see what is comparable on either side, and any new home constructed would have to utilize a similar front yard setback, and so that that pattern of development continues along that block face. Looking down under external appearance, several things are touched on here, including building height, building materials, building foundation materials, and roof pitch. And again, the idea is that you would look at the surrounding homes and the character of those surrounding homes and incorporate similar features. On the next page, there are elements that relate to a front facade element, such as a front porch or a front stoop, or some change in architectural relief along the front facade that would complement the character of the neighboring homes in that same block face. There are different sections within the neighborhood as far as the character, but I think the way the staff has proposed the language, it would be flexible in any scenario to where, again, you're just looking to see what exists on either side of the proposed development and looking at trying to incorporate features that would complement what's existing. Along those same lines, window sizes would be considered as well. I'm going to skip, well, actually, the accessory apartment language in letter B, that is just relating to the design elements, so the building height, materials, foundation materials, not necessarily to the accessory apartment changes, which I'll touch on in just a second. Looking at driveways and parking areas, there are proposed standards for the location and character of new driveways or parking areas. And then the last, well, okay, I am going to skip the accessory apartment section at the bottom of page 492 and finish just with the development standards that are proposed. There's one item that touches on fences on the back page. And then there's also, as Ben mentioned, it's our hope that this would be 99% staff approval, but there is an option to appeal any of the staff determinations, and those appeals would go to the Historic Preservation Board. We thought that that was the most appropriate board because they're already familiar with the architectural review process, and so anyone who would like to appeal a staff determination would be welcome to do that through the Historic Preservation Board. I will jump back to page 492, and we will look at the accessory apartment proposed language. This is...
Should we pause for a second and ask if there's any questions on the architectural overlay?
Yeah, we can do
And
that.
one point I want to make too is this would also include existing homes if they were doing a renovation or an addition as well. It wouldn't be just new infill.
So if an existing home, hypothetically, for whatever reason, had vinyl siding or the 1950s, what do you call that, cement board?
Asbestos or masonite.
Masonry, if they were gonna.
Masonite.
Masonite that has asbestos in it, if they're gonna replace that, then they also need to come.
So whenever they would submit their building permit, that information would just need to be supplied with that building permit, and we would do that as part of our permit review.
Okay.
But the breadth of allowed materials includes most of those things. If they're gonna repair like with like, I don't even know that they need a permit anyway, but if they do, then we would obviously approve that.
My only question was that when you go down Nutwood and Magnolia, there's different materials that have happened over the last 30 years.
We're not, this is flexible enough, and the intent is not to dictate what would go back necessarily. It would be if you had a 4-inch reveal lap siding, we would suggest you go back with that 4-inch lap siding, or you know, you could vary from that. But just be within the allowed materials. So if it was masonite, it wouldn't have to go back masonite. Probably can't buy it anyway. So you could use hardy board or vinyl or anything like that. So we wrote it very flexible in that regard.
Thank you.
So I think you've answered my question, but I want to make sure. Where's the trigger here? When do we review this? At building application, or where is it in the process?
We would review it through the permitting review when someone applies for a permit with the city. Of course, that wouldn't prevent anyone from calling staff in advance and just saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Can you kind of provide some guidance before I apply for a permit? Only to find out that it may not fit within a certain parameter. But
when we were having our neighborhood meetings, what we heard was very important was not to make the process burdensome. For example, if you're in a historic district, it sometimes could take 30 or 45 days to get before the board and have the notices go out and all of that. So the desire was to try to while realizing some form of bureaucracy would have to be in place, but to streamline the red tape to where it would be a much smoother process.
So, yeah, I think you're addressing my question. In the city now, when we're doing repairs, especially storm repairs, they've got a separate application. They're doing a great job with it, by the way, but we do have to call that out. So is it your understanding, even with a storm repair, this would be in front of, if you will, that application process, right?
It will go essentially in effect when the city approves it. So if someone was repairing their home now, they just get to, you know.
Right. And so, but when they apply for a permit, they'll go through this process, you guys would review it the same way here? All right, very good.
Yeah, so the only delay that a homeowner or an applicant might see would be if they didn't supply enough information to make a determination. We would then have to contact them and say, okay, you need to supply us with the exact roof pitch or elevation or whatever, but typically they have that with a set of plans.
I'm in agreement. This sounds pretty fast, so that's not terribly burdensome. And then, of course, for new construction, similar process, correct? All right, very good. Thank you.
no, you're fine. I didn't know, it would now be the appropriate time to ask for any public questions or comments on just the proposed establishment of the overlay zone and the development standards.
Exclusive of auxiliary units, correct?
Right. We haven't talked about that yet.
Okay. For the people in the audience, if you've heard what's been proposed, are there any questions to this point or comments that you would like to make regarding what's been proposed? Yes, ma'am. You've already been sworn in. Yes, ma'am. Your question?
My house was bulldozed. The garage is still remaining. It's the original garage.
Yeah, where do you live at?
Nutwood Street,
Okay.
800 block. And it's asbestos, so is that a problem? Because I was going to make it match the house with overlay. That,
No.
because
I don't see
otherwise I
that
got to
being an
spend
issue.
$20,000 to remove that stuff. Anyway,
No, there will be no issue.
because it was, okay, so I'm,
You should be good.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Your name and address, please, sir.
Blackerby, 1022 East 10th.
Swear to tell the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Just one quick question. This proposal that is on the floor, that is to the overlay. When you said it's laid out to turn all of the, basically to clean up and make sure that the properties are all single residence, correct? There's no ambiguity in that. Zoned single residence, no multi. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one thing that brought up a point that I feel like I probably should make. So there are a few duplexes in the neighborhood. So those will be allowed to continue. It doesn't automatically take anything away from those or take the rights to do that. That will continue. They will become what we call grandfathered in or have non-conforming rights at that point. So I want to make that point.
Is there any other questions in the audience or comments? Okay. Rachel, if you want to talk about the auxiliary apartments, please.
Okay, so the final piece of what you are considering this evening, we did have a request throughout the public input process to explore options for some flexibility with the accessory apartment standards. They are generally very similar to the current requirements for accessory apartments. However, there are two main differences. The first is that in this proposal, the proposed text amendment, the primary residence would not have to be owner occupied. So that would be a main difference from the current zoning ordinance requirement in the case of an accessory apartment. So right now the zoning ordinance says if you want to have an accessory apartment, the home has to be owner occupied. And then anyone who lives in the accessory apartment has to be related to the owner living in the primary residence. So that is the current requirement.
In single-family zones.
In single-family zones, yes. So the other main difference with the proposed text change, again, this is only for the Nutwood Magnolia area, is that the people who would reside in the accessory apartment would not have to be related to the people who are residing in the primary residence. But each dwelling unit independently would have to be occupied by one single family. The family unit living in the primary residence would have to be a single family.
Okay.
And the family unit residing in the accessory apartment would also have to be a single family, but they would not have to be related to each other.
So you can build the apartment and rent it out.
Correct. Under certain parameters. There are height and size requirements and numbers of bedrooms that you can't exceed and parking requirements. So those things would all
that
remain the
stays
same.
Okay.
Yes.
So really the only change is you can build the auxiliary apartment and you can rent it out to a non-family member.
And whoever is living in that unit would still have to be a single family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 3 college kids are not living in that.
Correct. That would not be allowed.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here. Am I interrupting? Have you finished? Or are you?
Commissioner Sissel just asked one question. Let me
I'm sorry.
answer her question
hear
first. So it was just requested throughout the public input process that we explore this option for their neighborhood specifically. It's possible, I mean, if it's recommended for approval and it's ultimately approved and adopted, it's possible that we could maybe look at similar options for other neighborhoods or the community as a whole. But at this time, it was just a request specifically by some of the neighbors in this area that we address it for their community.
Rachel, approximately how many auxiliary apartments are in these 2 blocks right now? I mean, it's
Honestly, not sure.
I'm sorry, what?
Not a whole lot.
Okay.
I wouldn't have maybe somebody to have a guess, but 10 maybe?
We were just asking for an approximate amount, if this is something, that's all.
Are you ready for questions? Yep. Okay, so I want some clarity here. It sounds as if we're allowing new construction of auxiliary units that currently do not exist.
Correct. Under this proposal, that would be permitted. And I guess, just to clarify, the current ordinance would also permit construction of an accessory apartment on the lots in this neighborhood. However, the home has to be owner occupied, and anyone living in the accessory apartment has to be related to the owner residing in the primary residence. That's the current requirement.
So the current requirement allows an auxiliary unit for and it can be occupied by a related party.
Yes.
Here, we appear to be just advocating or saying it's okay to own a home in this area and then build an apartment, an auxiliary unit, on the same lot and rent it out. So help me understand how that's different than multifamily. Because they don't even have to be related.
Right. So there are definitely differing opinions on this topic. That's why we wanted to kind of chunk
Okay.
it out separately.
All right.
But I guess, and Ben may want to chime in,
So
each unit would still be occupied by a single family. But
True.
you're correct that two families could reside on one
On the
property
same
under
deed.
this proposal.
So,
Yeah.
so this would be the in-between product?
Right.
So I think the college kids was mentioned somewhere.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I get
that
it.
still would not be allowed to have, if you had a 4-bedroom home or 5-bedroom home to 5 different college kids,
Mm-hmm.
and then build another unit with 2 more bedrooms with 2 more college kids.
Okay.
This would not allow that. Multifamily you can, so there's still a difference between the zones.
And I assume this still prohibits the Airbnb thing because of the ordinance in the city, is that correct? Or is that a different topic completely?
That's a different topic completely. I guess there's, in certain scenarios, you would be eligible to apply for a bed and breakfast in a single-family zone. But in those scenarios, in a single-family zone, the owner has to reside on the property and be present when any type of short-term rental use is occurring. It would, on the face of the zone that's proposed, you could not apply for a short-term rental use under a conditional use permit where you're just renting out the entire property
Okay.
on Airbnb.
So my last question is essentially this. Is it your understanding that you have request and/or support from the neighbors living in this area for these auxiliary units to be approved in the way that you're proposing them here?
By some.
By some,
It's not a
So this one wasn't
consensus.
unanimous,
So,
okay.
No, it was not, nothing's ever unanimous,
I
as you
understand.
kind of pointed out earlier.
Yeah.
But I would say, from the meetings we had, this was probably the most controversial, but we had about 2/3 support, and that's just a wild guess.
Right.
Just a minute,
So,
let him
yeah.
finish.
Just a wild guess. For the architectural overlay, my guess only, you can feel free to disagree, but my guess only was about 75% agreement on that. Now, the change the zoning was 99%, so.
Okay, all right, very good. And, okay, I think that's all of my questions for now.
I have a question. So, are they okay with it if there's the auxiliary unit and there is a relative living there, or are we changing this because how are we really documenting whether that is an actual family member living in these existing auxiliary? Like what are the steps there? Or is that why we're?
Somebody'd have to report them.
So is it an enforcement issue, or is that what you're asking, Amy?
Yes, I mean, like,
Yeah.
are we changing this because we're not able to
No,
identify?
it's
or-
not really for that reason. It was honestly just because there's not a consensus on this topic, but there were some residents who requested that we explore this option simply because some of them said, hey, I'm getting older, I want some supplementary income, I could have an accessory dwelling unit in my backyard and rent it to another family. I don't know that it was because of an enforcement issue that it was proposed.
Okay. But just to be clear, the reason you're bringing this to us is as a result of the public meetings that you had a number of requests for this, is that correct?
Yes, this was not on our radar at all until we started meeting with the neighborhood, and it was just brought up in passing in some of the, when we were meeting on just the zoning itself.
Well, I applaud you. You got down to one issue where you almost had unanimous consent. So, and as sticky as these issues are, yeah, good job with that. And it sounds, so it looks like we've got some public input here as well.
Rachel, are you through with, or you completed your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Before you sit down, are there any more questions for Ms. Hurt from the commissioners? Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
We have people in the audience tonight. Is there a particular spokesperson for anybody on, I think what we're dealing with tonight is the auxiliary apartments, or anybody's welcome to come to the microphone, and we will be glad to hear any comments you have. So anybody that wants to come. Your name and address, please.
Brittany Blackerby, 1022 East 10th Avenue. I do swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
For Rachel, could you elaborate on the size limitations or requirements for those auxiliary units?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me get to that page. Oh, yeah, actually. Anticipated this might happen. And let me. Okay. So regarding the size, any accessory apartment, the floor area of that accessory apartment would not be permitted to exceed 50% of the floor area of the principal structure. There is also a requirement down here in letter E that is somewhat related to your question, which limits the number of bedrooms in an accessory apartment to no more than 2. And those are the current requirements in the zoning ordinance, and those are not proposed to change.
Rachel, can you define for us the term floor area? Is that the entire footprint, including garage, or just living area?
It's conditioned living space.
Conditioned living space.
Yes.
So if they have a 1,200 square foot conditioned living space home, they could build a maximum of a 600 square foot conditioned living space home as an auxiliary unit, correct?
Correct.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Em, does that answer your question? Would you come to the microphone, please?
Sorry, we have to ask you, each of you to come to the microphone so we can have a record.
So the auxiliary units, appearance-wise, would they also be required to match the primary structure?
So there are proposed architectural standards. Let me. Okay, so those are listed in item B. Overall building height shall not exceed the height of the primary residence. Building materials shall incorporate the same materials utilized for the primary residence, and building foundation materials shall not include visible, plain, or split face block.
Thank you. Yes. Sure. Your name and address, please.
Pam Bratcher, 1040 Nutwood Street.
Swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I've lived at my home since 1992. It was built in 1931, and I really do love our neighborhood. The accessory dwelling concerns me greatly because I believe that the text amendment and some of the communications that may have come, they're coming from investors. They're not really coming from residents of the neighborhood. The residents who attended the April 26 hearing greatly opposed the accessory dwelling unless they had an existing carriage house that existed before the tornado, or it was something that was already there. You know, if it's a family member, I have no objection to that. But for instance, next door to me at 1036 Nutwood, there are 4 bedrooms. It's owned by an investor. There's a large backyard. They could easily put an apartment building in the back. Then we have 6 people who maybe are driving cars. We have a density of population issue. We have a parking issue. It's not appropriate for the neighborhood, and the accessory dwelling actually takes away from what is being accomplished by the single-family zoning change and the architectural overlay, which I both greatly support. So, and I also would note, the notice that was given doesn't include anything regarding an accessory building. When I received this, and I'm an attorney, it's clear it has to do with single-family residential, and it has to do with overlay. There's nothing in here about an accessory building. So I wouldn't know this issue was being brought up. And I noticed it's a text amendment, which is apparently it came in late. But that concerns me also because I could see residents being complacent, even though I do see several here that I know are opposed to this accessory dwelling. So I would ask that you vote against the accessory dwelling, and I think, Mr. Graham, you've picked up on exactly why it's not appropriate in this neighborhood to have that. It will be used in an opportunist way, and it will go against the character of this very historic neighborhood. Thank you.
Very much. Yes, sir.
Rachel, let me ask a question. So if I'm an investor who owns a house, I can't build an accessory unit in the back and rent it out because I'm not living in the house, correct?
Not
Under the current zoning ordinance text.
But you could under this one.
The proposal would allow that.
So it would
Yes.
allow, even though the primary,
Right.
I thought it had to be, yeah,
That,
what you
the
said.
owner occupancy requirement is the current requirement.
So
That's one of the main differences in the
Okay, I
proposed
misunderstood
text,
you.
is that
Okay.
it would
So
allow.
the primary resident, the owner of the house, doesn't have to live in the house, on the parcel.
Right, under the text
Okay.
amendment that's proposed.
So really at this point, you're creating a multifamily parcel. You're creating 2 units if you want it.
You would
That
have
you
the
can rent-
opportunity.
That you can rent out to 2 different
For
families.
2 families to live on the
who are
same parcel.
Who are non-owners.
Correct.
Okay.
Not related. The 2 families don't have to
Yeah.
be related to each other. We don't have a number of how many non-owner occupied houses are there. Do we know that?
Address?
Natalie Pinarola, 1032 Magnolia.
Natalie, you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
We moved in the night before the tornado. That's luck. But I'm one of the people that started some of these meetings, and I can tell you a little bit about where the accessory dwelling came from. Some of us thought of it as a compromise because we want single-family zoning no matter what. We do not want it to be multifamily. We do not want fourplexes on our block that's on the National Registry of Historic Homes. We're the Magnolia Street Historic District. And there was a lot of talk. We saw them out there while we were cleaning up, scoping some homes. So that was kind of our, I will only support it if it has to stay multifamily. We would rather have single-family zoning and the ability to have an accessory dwelling unit. If that's a compromise, I'm not necessarily for it, but we really want that single-family look of those homes to stay. That's part of the charm. That's why most of us chose to live there, and we would like it to have that appearance. And that's the only way I really want that accessory dwelling unit, is if that's the compromise to investors and landlords. And I'm not against landlords. We own residential and commercial property. But I do want to make sure that, they keep the properties and the neighborhood the way it was. And so I think that's what most of us were concerned about. I don't know that there's huge support for it unless that's the compromise, so.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Dean, I've got a question. Is there anybody here in support of the accessory apartments being built?
But Mr. Volk, wait, what Mr. Volker just said.
Show of hands.
Is there anybody here in support? We're going to get to everybody's comment. Is there anybody here tonight in support of the auxiliary residence? Is there anybody here tonight in opposition to that? All right, thank you very much. So are there any additional comments other than what has been made regarding the auxiliary apartments? Yes, ma'am, we'll get to him. Okay, come on, sir.
I'm Liacano. I'm actually a tenant at 884 Nutwood Street. I'm a former...
Swear to tell the truth? All right.
I do, sir. I'm a current tenant at 884 Nutwood Street. I'm a former homeowner at 1044. I was a neighbor of Pam when I was married to my daughter's mother, Ruth Goff. She resides at 1044 right now. I'm at 884. On Saturday, my house that I've been living at with my daughter, who I have joint custody with, is being auctioned off. My landlord is dying, a landlord that I never met. My concern about what is being proposed, I was not able to go to most of these meetings because I work evenings. I work for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I run support groups in the evening. This is very important to me as a tenant, and a tenant who more than likely on Saturday is going to lose my home because an investor is probably going to outbid local residents who want to keep the neighborhood as is. When I hear maybe 2/3, that's not good enough for me. That there's no one here in support of it other than you. No, I'm saying that there's no one, that no one raised their hand in support of the auxiliary.
Okay, let's not point fingers. Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, not using real numbers upsets me.
Okay.
And to do a blanket, this is what we're going to do. I'm opposed to the adding more structures to a neighborhood that is quiet, beautiful, and because of a tornado, may be subject to investors or, quite frankly, vultures who are going to come in and change the structure of the neighborhood. That's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you, sir. Okay, are there any other comments other than what we haven't heard? Jace?
I'll tell the truth.
You got to state your
sure.
name and address.
Jace Pinerola. I'm at 1032 Magnolia. I just really wanted just to add a little bit is, because I'm probably in part the genesis of this, as the end of the meeting, the last public hearing came forth, we were looking at basically three components. The single-family zoning, the architectural overlay, and there was talk as it related to the accessory dwelling. So I say I'm the genesis behind it is I promoted moving all three forward because we were getting to a point that was a little bit shaky, knowing that there'd be a public hearing. So with that, I do want to say is, you know, they forwarded that, not of their own thoughts or ideas, but rather the public hearing. I did not look around to see if there was, I know there wasn't unanimity, but as whether there was a majority. And then having brought that forward, I just want to go on record is I'm totally for single family. After hearing all this, I could definitely see where it may have a different name, but kind of start to look very similar to multifamily, as well as address some of the problems where we live. We have a lot of the homes only have an access point in the alleyway, so that could really become problematic as far as your ability to get in and out. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's a non-issue for me. I mean, if there's opposition to that, it was really more just to support bringing forward what the differing opinions are, knowing that we'd have the ability to come forward and negate that last one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jace. Mm-hmm. Is there any other comments different than what we've heard?
wanted to reiterate Mr. Pennarolla's point in that when there was an email sent out to residents of the neighborhood initially asking if you were interested in the auxiliary units being an option, I and probably some other people voted yes, not exactly understanding that it would allow both units to be rented out. I pictured it as a family in the main house and then maybe like a young adult son in the apartment. But with the knowledge now that it could be two separate rented out units, which is, I think, what we're trying to prevent with the allowance of duplexes. I wanted to say that I do not support the auxiliary units under these conditions, and I think that my vote and probably other people's votes came without that full understanding. So when you said 2/3, I think that probably was high.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
So let me make
Let Mr. Peterson talk.
Yeah, let me make a suggestion here that might simplify this. So we came prepared for this because we knew it was going to be controversial, but we were asked to bring it forward, and we did. Just for the record, I have no dog in the fight. I don't care either way. I didn't, all I did was try to create, all we did as staff try to create what the neighborhood wanted. So, Rachel, I think we have spoken, and if we would strike number 4, the accessory apartments on page 4-92, just strike that whole section, then the accessory apartment thing is taken out of the equation, and we would only be then talking about the zone change and the overlay with architectural controls.
So Hamp, would this be just like an applicant who offered an amendment? Right? Correct. Okay.
And to confirm, that would also run into page 493 through letter F. We would strike all of that.
All of paragraph 4 on both 492 and 93.
So Ben, as the representative for the applicant, and essentially you're acting as the applicant in tonight's hearing.
So the way to say the city of Bowling Green and you all, the Planning Commission, have directed staff to try to do what the neighborhood wanted. We brought forward with what the outcome of that was, and now based on the testimony tonight, I would suggest we remove that and just proceed forward.
And I'll add, I applaud you for getting it here. I think Chase did a great job of summarizing it. Apparently there was some division at the meeting. You knew it's got to go to a public hearing. Okay, if that's a compromise, let's get it to the public hearing. You did a great job with that. I applaud each of you for getting it to this point. Now it's vetted here at the public hearing. There's a proposal to strike it, and so the process worked in my view.
Okay. All right. So are there any other comments in our audience tonight? We appreciate you all being here. Our first motion will be for
Chair Warren, hold on just a second. I think we've identified a couple of more
There are-
spots just for the record that
there
we
are
need to strike.
2 more pages on 4-7. There's a proposed change to strike out language. That would not be changed. We would keep it as is. And then also on page 4-13, there's an exception that is proposed to be called out for Nutwood Magnolia area for accessory apartments. We would not accept that change because we are no longer proposing that change. So that would not be adopted and it would remain the same.
So we strike those as well, correct?
Yes.
So Hamp, do you have a record of what we're recording, what they're proposing here?
Yes, I do, and I think staff's clear about that, unless there are any questions from you all about what's being changed for the proposed text amendments.
Why don't you summarize what the accessory apartments will be
First, and
since
then we
we've
gotta go
removed
to
the request for tonight?
to the number 14.
So to summarize, the discussion we're having now is that we would remove any changes relating to accessory apartments that are proposed in the text change. Everything would stay identical to the way it is now, which currently you are permitted under the ordinance to build an accessory apartment, but the house has to be owner occupied, and anyone living in the accessory dwelling unit has to be related to whoever is residing in the primary residence. That's the current zoning ordinance requirement, and if we remove the proposed text language, that would all stay the same.
Will we lose our historic or our architectural overlay for any new accessory dwellings that would be built?
Swear you in.
Swear me in to ask a question.
Can do this right. Yeah, well, if we
Yes,
don't,
please.
then.
I'm Tanya Taylor. I live at 1016 Nutwood Street.
Swear
and
to tell
I'll
the truth.
tell the
Thank
truth,
you.
yeah. When I ask a question, will we lose our architectural overlay that would help us with any accessory dwellings that were built if we do this strikeout?
You would not. The accessory, there's still the one section that we looked at earlier for the architectural overlay elements regarding building height materials and building foundation materials for any accessory dwelling unit.
Thank you very kindly. So my understanding is we will put forward the architectural overlay. And what was the other section that we'll put forward?
Zoning.
The zoning change, the big one.
Yeah.
So those are the two that will go forward. Is that, hey, that's not bad, said Meatloaf. Thank you.
All right.
I have a question about the text amendment on the appeal process. So is that different than the other overlays?
Yes, this is a newly established overlay.
So but the appeal process for the other existing ones, what is it like this that you're proposing? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so what in general, all planning processes, the appeal process is the same. It's just sometimes if there's a board in between those. So in this particular case, if they're don't like or not in agreement with what staff says, it would be appealed to the Historic Preservation Board. Then if they don't like what the Historic Preservation Board says, then it would be appealed to Circuit Court. And then, so there's just that one step in between. Versus any other zoning administrator determination, if someone disagrees, then that is appealed to the Board of Adjustment and then on to Circuit Court. So it just kind of depends on how the mechanism.
Okay. Our first motion tonight will be for to rezone the tracts of land in Nutwood, Magnolia from RS 1D, single family residential, and RM2, two-family residential, to RS 1D.
And to establish the overlay. zone.
Overlay.
Yes, sir.
And the overlay. Thank you, Ben.
So are we ready for a motion? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we're ready for motion on number 13.
All right. I make a motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment from RM2 and RS1D to RS1D, and further move to approve the establishment of the Nutwood Magnolia Overlay District, docket number 2022-37ZBG. Based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing, the proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 Comprehensive Plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objectives and action items presented in the staff report. Therefore, the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, I request that this motion include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Unseld?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale? Yes, sir. Commissioner Volker?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Drain?
Yes, sir.
Chair Warren?
Yes, sir. The motion passed and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission. We got one more.
One more, yeah.
Does he have this? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you have before you a suggested motion to approve the text amendment. And I would suggest to you that if you're inclined to approve the text amendment with the deletions and amendments we've talked about, that your motion would recite in the first sentence, I make the motion to approve the proposed zoning ordinance text amendments with the amendments as presented.
Commissioners, you heard council with the correct wording. Is there a motion to approve?
Do I need to read the full motion, Hamp?
If you have it in front
All
of you,
right,
that
I'll
would
be
be
glad to. I make a motion to approve the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment with the
amendments as presented.
amendments as presented. My motion is based on the findings of fact as presented by staff and the testimony presented in this public hearing that the zoning text amendment is in agreement with Section 3.10 of the Warren County zoning ordinance and the Kentucky Revised Statute, Chapter 100.211. Further, a request that the findings of fact and recommendation to be sent to the Bowling Green City Commission and include a summary of the evidence and testimony presented by the proponents and/or opponents of the proposed text amendment.
Second.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ritchie, Commissioner Unsold,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Vitale,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Blackburn, Commissioner Sissel,
Yes.
Commissioner Drain, Chair Warren.
Yes. The motion passes and goes to the Bowling Green City Commission. Thank you all for being here tonight. Ben, are there any other discussion items for tonight?
Yes, sir.
So
Thank you all.
We will adjourn and see you in June.
Thank you.